Okay, so we'll just say some prayers quickly, and we will recite a particular verse from the Bhagavad Gita, and then we'll have some discussion. As we said, it'll be interactive, so we're going to invite you to stay awake, to try not to sleep, and let's see how we go from that point. Okay, Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshu Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tvam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sutta Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarabhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay. Thank you, Prabhu. Okay. Did everyone get a good night's sleep yesterday? I can see it. I'm not sure, but that's okay. We'll work with whatever we can. So welcome. The presentation today, as I was asked to deliver this by the organizers, is related to this idea of total well-being and health. So health and wellness. What we're trying to do through this presentation is really think about this. Moving towards a state of real and dynamic health and balance. Okay, so as we go through today, as we said before, we're going to encourage you and invite you to really think about this, but it may be a way that we don't necessarily approach our classes and our communities. So we want to invite you to what we call personalize your practice. Very simple idea. We have so many teachings in Krishna consciousness, so many things that we hear in a class, so many things that we read in different books, maybe in conversations and letters also. But there's a real area of opportunity if we try and do a little bit of a translation in terms of hearing the knowledge, the teachings, but then thinking, what does this mean for me? Of all the things that we hear in a class, which things are most relevant and resonant with me at this particular state of my own journey, at this particular time in my life? And the reason why we invite you to do this is because we sometimes see a real crisis in our communities. Just to give some context to this. What we often see is that there's a disconnect between the philosophy, the practice, and the results. Can anyone relate to that? I hear one thing. Sometimes I do a subsection of that because it's not always so easy to practice. But then will I receive or will I experience this also somewhere else? Can anyone relate to that, or is it just me in my spiritual life? So what we try to do, or one of the ways in which we can try to, let's say, close the gap or resolve this seeming mystery or puzzle, is to think about which of the things that I hear are particularly relevant for me. And how, most importantly, how do I apply this in my own life? Yeah? The danger is if we don't have that, if we don't do these additional steps, we can be overwhelmed and overloaded with so much information. Then we may find that we're not quite getting the results that we expect to see. And that then can cause a lack of faith. We may even question, does this actually work? I read this, I'm trying to do this, but nothing seems to be happening in my own existence. So one of the things that my spiritual master was really focused on was this idea of applied spiritual technology. And I just say for myself, in my own life, it's been a complete game changer. This understanding of taking what I read or hear and thinking not just about all of it, but considering what's particularly relevant, not just considering by myself, but considering through the association. So this is what I think is relevant. My friends, my mentors, well, this is what I'm thinking. This is how I'm thinking to apply it. Do you have a particular view? Right? So trying to understand what's particularly relevant and how do I practically use this? So hopefully we'll touch upon these points as we go through the presentation today as well. We're going to start, as we always do, in our movement, or often do, with a verse. So this is the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6, text number 5. So what I'll do is I'll just recite it once, just because I want to keep brevity of time. Maybe we'll have 1 or 2 people recite it, then we'll go to the translation, then we'll build the conversation from that point. How does that sound to everyone? It's good? Okay. And as we said before, we really want to tune in with this idea that when we come together, that there are no accidents. Just like when we first came to this retreat and we did this exercise as a group, we asked you to make a prayer, and then we also asked you to choose a particular verse. Just on that point, how many of you found that the verse you chose, it spoke to you, and you felt a sense that there's a reason, I get a sense of why I'm being given this verse? I also had the same experience. And to be very frank with you, because we want to make this much more of a dialogue, to be very frank with you, that's the thing that really inspires me in my Krishna consciousness. A feeling that actually Krishna is there, and it's not just a mechanical process. It's actually not meant to be mechanical at all. There's a little disclaimer there. But it's not just a process. Actually, Krishna consciousness is a relationship. And just like when we try to get to know someone in a relationship, we want to spend time with them. We want to communicate with them, but communicate very honestly, very openly. We want to feel that they get us, right? That they understand where we are at, what we're doing, what we're struggling with, and that there's some sense of reciprocation. Right? So it's not just a vacuum, it's not just a kind of idea, but, oh, I can see Krishna did this. Or I was struggling with this particular issue, Krishna arranged for me to understand this. So before we even begin reciting the verse, one quick request. Just as we did on the first day, I'm going to ask you all to turn to the deities, to turn towards the deities, however you want to do it, and just make, in your own words, a sincere and heartfelt request that as we go throughout today, the rest of the retreat, hopefully in this class as well, that we receive some things, some messages that their lordships want us to understand. Something that will actually help us in our journey, and that we also are receptive to their messages, their communication, in whichever way, shape, or form they wish to bring it into our life. Is that okay? Now, you can say this in your own words. That's also important because we want it to be heartfelt. We want it to be real. We want to really get that into our spiritual practice, and something I speak to many devotees about around the world. How do I make sure this is real and personal? So I actually feel Krishna consciousness. I feel Krishna's presence in my life in whichever way, shape, or form. So I don't think it's just a blank canvas where I'm just doing all these things, ticking all these boxes, but actually, wow, I can see something's happening. Someone's there. Okay? So we'll take a few moments to their lordships, or if you want to pray to your own personal deities, the deities that you have a particular relationship with, that's also fine. We'll give you a few moments to do that, then we're going to step on into the verse. I'll hand over now to you to make those prayers. We'll give you a few more moments to do that, and then we will step on. Okay. So once you're done, I'm going to ask you to turn back, and then we'll get into the actual verse in purple. So we have until 8:45, and that's including Q&A, or? After that, okay, no worries. So I'll just repeat this verse once, And then we'll have one side from the, once from the men, once for the ladies, and then we'll go on from there. So this is Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6, text number 5. So I'll just go through the whole thing. You don't have to repeat it. I'll just do the whole, all 4 lines. Then someone will do all 4 lines like that. Udaret atmanatmanam, nat manam, avasadayet, atmeva yatmano bandhu, atmeva ripu atmanaha. Okay, so one side from the men, then we'll go to the ladies. Who would like to recite? Yeah, maybe take the microphone. But actually, when you do it, you'll do one line at a time, actually, because I think it works better. Yeah.
Okay. Uddaradatmanatmanam.
Udaret atmanatmanam.
Natmanam avasadayet.
Natmanam avasadayet.
Atmaiva yatmano bandhur.
Atmeva yatmano bandhu.
Atmaiva ripuratmana.
Atmeva ripu atmanaha. I have one recitation from the side of the ladies, whoever would like to do.
Udharedatmanatmanam.
Udaretatmanatmanam.
Natmanam avasadayet.
Atnatmanam avasadayet.
Atmaiva hyatmano bandhur.
Atmeva yatmano bandhu.
Atmaiva ripuratmana.
Atmeva ripuatmanaha. Okay, so we won't do word for word, but we'll just go straight to the translation, to also save time. So please repeat after me. One must deliver himself with the help of his mind and not degrade himself. The mind is a friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well. Okay, so this verse is the introductory statement for this particular discussion. And we're getting into this because we know in our lives, let's put it another way, life can be challenging. And there are many things that we have to deal with as we try to navigate this particular world. We have, first of all, at this bottom level, the environment. So, matrasbastas tukuntaya shishtoshna sukha dukkata. Krishna makes the point very easily that this world, you'll see all this up and down, right? This cycle of happiness and distress. So in our environments, we meet many different challenges in life. It could be, as Radha Bhakti explained in her class, was it adhyatmika, adidaivika, adibodhika klesha. Difficulties from other people, adibodhika, difficulties from the mind and body, right, adhyatmika, and difficulty from the environment. Sometimes it's also translated difficulty from the devas. That's relating to the environment. We see one very, one very vivid example during the pandemic. A whole global situation practically shutting down most global economies or restricting them in many ways. So these dynamics are always going on. We always see these things happening. But the fun doesn't stop there, ladies and gentlemen, because we also experience difficulties within ourselves. So here, the senses. It says the senses demand action from the mind. Have you ever found that you're in a situation where you have a habit that you want to give up and it's very difficult? Anyone ever had that experience? I was studying how technology works, and I came across this article. It was an article on the BBC website, and they were talking about what's called persuasive design. So they spoke about how the technology, the apps are designed to be addictive, basically. And they explain how these things are done. To give a classic example, when you're looking at your WhatsApp and someone's about to message you or something like that, you'll see a message go on that so-and-so's typing, or this person sending an audio message. So they explain that the psychologists who designed the technology designed it specifically so that you feel that you're about to get something, right? So this idea, you're about to get a reward. Someone's typing, you're about to get something. And every time you perceive that something's about to come to you, every time, that creates an addiction. Every time you engage with a certain technology and you feel, I'm just about to receive something. So this whole idea of technology, in many cases, is not human-centered. It's designed in such a way to really make it so that we will be so addicted to using it that then they can make money from it. I think I saw this in one explanation of modern day technology. It said, if you can't understand what the product is, then that means you're the product. That was the idea. If you can't understand what the product is, it's like if you can't figure out why they help me out so much, why are they providing this service, it means you're the product, basically. This idea of the modern society, or the way the modern society is designed, is based around the idea of profit and using humans for profit. You know, there's this famous saying that we are meant to love people and use things. But we see in the modern world it's completely opposite way around. We use people and very much love things. And that creates all kinds of disharmony, both physical, mental, emotional, and until we get to a certain level, what's happening with us physically, mentally, and emotionally, it definitely has an impact upon us spiritually as well. And Prabhupada explains this in many cases. So the senses are stimulated by the environment, and they send signals to the mind, right? So we want this, we want to experience that. So the mind, as we said in this particular verse, always best friend or worst enemy. Depending on how it's conditioned, the messages that it receives, the habits that it's formed, it can go up, or it can bring us up, or it can bring us down. Now, if the mind, and this is the level above, if the mind is strengthened by transcendental knowledge, then actually what happens is then we amplify our freedom. It is a very interesting fact that not everyone has the same degree of free will. Think about this point carefully. Every one of us in this room, we actually all have different degrees of free will based upon previous choices that we make. And that is why some things become easier for us, some things become harder for us. It's also based upon our previous choices in previous lives. I had a friend, well, he's actually still a friend, he's a devotee. He joined the temple. So amongst our friends, he was the first person to join the temple. And he used to stay at the temple in London, Sri Sri Radha Londonshwara. And I remember he would give class on the Vyasa-san. And then at the last 10 minutes of the class, he'd let me sit next to him on the floor and like, give a few points at the end of the class. It was actually really good. He was a great devotee. But he was from a very, very wealthy family, extremely wealthy family. And he was told by one, he was getting some kind of, reading about his karma and different things. And he was told by the person who did the reading, said that taking drugs is bad for everyone. No one should do it. But they warned him and said, but for you, it is especially dangerous. Then the person, it was explained to him, said, in your previous life, you engaged in a lot of drug taking. So what that means is that in your subtle body, you have a particular weakness for intoxication. So it's bad for anyone, but if you take it, it will really damage you. It will really bring your life down. He told me that. And unfortunately, I think he forgot that warning. I remember visiting him in a psychiatric ward in a hospital in London, because he had actually taken drugs and he had opened up a whole range of issues. And he was actually staying in a hospital. They'd actually sectioned him off. It was really intense. I mean, he's better now, but it was a long journey to recovery. And it really got me thinking about this topic from that perspective, that actually we often may neglect this idea, I'm a spirit soul, Prabhu, I'm not the body, while we're eating pizza and chips and, all these other things. So we sometimes have this disconnect in our spiritual life. See, I've been meditating on this for a long time. And this is a subtle thing that we should remember. There's a difference between what we understand philosophically, what we act on culturally, and what we realize spiritually. I'll repeat that. There's a difference between what we accept philosophically, what we act on culturally, and what we realize spiritually. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, one of the greatest saints in our tradition, a great acharya, he explains that if you're not a Paramahamsa, if you're not someone who's on the highest level, fully self-realized, he says, actually, you have to do 4 things. He says you have to have good care for your body, right? Good stimulation for your mind, good social situation. That means the emotional life, social situation. And the 4th thing he says is a good study of the scripture to see how all these things fit together. I have my own personal experience of this. To be very honest with you, my especially the early years, but it generally is still true, incredibly blissful in Krishna consciousness. But it was so good, I thought to myself, you know what? We can just do more. And I made a critical mistake. Thinking that it was really good, everything's going really well, I cut back on sleep. This was in 2010. And I cut back so much that what happened was it created a situation where I had, for many years after, like over a decade, chronic fatigue. And so I was like literally tired from morning till evening. And what that did, because I was just trying to figure out, what have I done wrong? How the hell do I get out of this situation? And it took me on a journey. It took me on a journey to really understand more deeply 2 things. First, about how the mind and body should be utilized in Krishna consciousness. That's the first point. And second, this idea of how to take the statements of the scripture and personalize it to ourselves. How to really do that last step, that translation work. Yes, the statements are there, but how does that apply to me at my particular stage of Krishna consciousness? The reason we talk about this also is because the body and mind actually have a very, very powerful role to play in our spiritual journey. The Sanskrit term, from the spiritual perspective, the body and mind, the Sanskrit term for them is sadhana sharira, which means that they're literally the vehicles for our spiritual practice. Right? So thinking about the body as a vehicle, the body and the mind as a vehicle, we have a destination to get to. But in order to get to that particular destination, we need to keep the vehicle in good shape. If the vehicle goes down, it becomes incredibly, or increasingly, let's say, difficult to get to where we need to get to. Now, just take a moment to think about what this means for us as a community. Think about how many times relationships have broken down, or how many times we've actually struggled with our own spiritual practice. And it's not because of the spiritual practice, interestingly enough. And it's not even because of the person who we're having a relationship, but it's because of the state of our own bodies and minds. Can anyone relate to that? You know, maybe I was a bit tired, a little bit snappy, a little bit irritated, right? Or I was a bit tired and I had a really, really good sleep during Srimad Bhagavatam class, right? And you had that kind of experience. There was a joke going around ISKCON when I joined, that Bhagavatam class is a great cure for insomnia. Now, it shouldn't be that way. I know people watching online, we're not saying that's good, by the way. It shouldn't be that way. But we often see that. And just think about what happens over time if this keeps going on. I had a very interesting conversation with His Holiness Satyananda Maharaj about this many years ago. Many conversations. And one of them was on this particular point. And a few of us were speaking about this yesterday. He was telling me, he said that many devotees, to use different words, but he was talking about how many devotees, without meaning to, we've created a negative emotional association with our practice. Right? It's so interesting. I've been studying Vedic psychology for the last few years because it's incredibly fascinating. What he was explaining to me, we were in Goloka Dham. I believe it was Goloka Dham, yes. Yeah, it was Goloka Dham. So he was explaining what was going on. And as he started to unpack it, he basically what he was saying is, we live on 2 levels. So for many of us as devotees, subconsciously, we may have some negative association with various aspects of Krishna consciousness. For example, sometimes devotees who are born in the movement, let's say they went to a particular school and the teachers weren't very aware, weren't very balanced. So what happens is that young devotee did something wrong and the teacher decides in their wisdom that the punishment is you're going to have to stand in the corner and chant Hare Krishna. Right? So now that young person, over time, they've now started to associate the chanting, the very process of liberation and spiritual realization, they've now started to associate that practice with punishment. And over time, it becomes a subconscious association. So every time they pick up the beads, there's a term for this called implicit memory, right? Every time they pick up the beads, the implicit memory triggers that actually this is what you had to do when you were shamed, when you were punished, when you were humiliated, when you were told off. And therefore, on a subconscious level, there's great resistance. And it's not even, and they may not even be conscious of it. They may have forgotten those instances. But it's playing out at the back of the mind. And then what's happening consciously, because this is how often the mind works for most of us, is that even though one thing's playing out subconsciously, on a conscious level, they'll be like, I'll do my rounds later on. Right? And so it's like, yeah, I'm going to do my rounds, but this is an emergency. I've got to do this first. Or it will be, I'm suddenly tired. I'll do my rounds, but I just need to take a nap because, I'm really tired, Or, my friend's going through something. I will do my rounds, but I just need to call them and find out how they're doing because they're going through some real difficulty. So on a conscious level, there's one rationalization. But if we were able to see more deeply into what's going on behind the scenes, we would realize that I'm avoiding this practice because I have some negative association related to the practice. This is one of the reasons why when we associate with devotees, it's so incredibly powerful. There's a formula. One is the association, but even more than the association is asking the right questions in the association. When I ask the right questions in the association, I can see things about myself that I could not see otherwise. Because all of those people, devotees who are around us, they may perceive something about us that we don't perceive about ourselves. So the first thing we want to encourage you to do, and you may want to take this as something to do regularly, periodically, is touch base with the devotees. But it's also, as I said, asking the right questions. Prabhu, you've known me for some time. What do you think I should be focusing on? Any advice on what you think I should do more of? Or maybe what I should be doing less of, or what I should be doing differently? We often will find, and I've seen this in my own life, that often when you ask the right questions to devotees, Krishna will often use the devotees that you're speaking to give you some amazing answers that can transform your spiritual life. This is really how it works. We want to understand that our body and our mind is a vehicle. Okay? Now the question is, how is the vehicle at this current state of time? Right? How is the vehicle that you're using the vehicle of your spiritual practice? And we all know this intuitively. When you've had a good sleep, taking care of yourself physically, etc., is it harder or easier to chant Hare Krishna? What do you think? It's much easier. What I've seen over many years, many communities, is that there's a disconnect between the philosophy and the application of it. And that bridge, ladies and gentlemen, is one of the most significant gaps that we can close in our spiritual life. I really believe this. I really believe we can have a much more blissful, joyful, fulfilling, and realized spiritual life if we pay a bit more attention, not just to the teaching, that's important, absolutely, but how am I actually applying this teaching in a wise, compassionate, and personal way in my own spiritual life. Okay, I'm going to repeat that. Wise, compassionate, and personal application of the teaching. And it's not just good for me. We're role models for each other. If I'm applying it in a wise, compassionate, and personal way for myself, you know what people will start to notice? Oh, Don, how come you're so happy? What's wrong with you, Prabhu? You shouldn't be happy. We're ISKCON. I mean, what's going on here? We don't do happiness, right? You should suffer. I want to see sleep. I want to see tiredness. But this person seems to be very, very happy. What are you doing differently? Wise, compassionate, personal way of practicing spiritual life. This is what we want to get into. And that can be done by recognizing our needs. We're going to do an exercise on this in a moment. So these are 6 needs. 6 needs that we should be looking after, and goes back to the first slide, in a dynamic way. I really want to emphasize this word dynamic to you. Dynamic means that it's not just you tick the box and you do things in a certain way and that's going to work for you forever. Because we're personal, and because life is personal, at different points in our spiritual life, some things become more important, some things become less important. Do you see where I'm coming from? For example, when we're younger, I mean, when Radha Bhakti and I were talking before this retreat, and we were thinking, if we're staying in a room with very young people, you guys can stay up all night. Your body's like that. Dude, when you get to my age, it's a different story, right? We're not sleeping, we're not staying up all night because, the body has different needs. So at one point, we have more capacity to do certain things. At another point, there's less capacity. At one point, some things become more important. At another point, some things become less important. And that, interestingly enough, is a sign of the mode of goodness. The symptom of the mode of goodness is the state of dynamic balance. Right? It's not that things are rigid. In the mode of goodness, it's like the scales. Right? If you tip something on one side, things go up. If you tip something down on one side, things go up on the other, and then but that's okay. But you're moving into a state of equilibrium. So it's a movement. It's a dynamic balance. In fact, there's one devotee I know who did a PhD, and as part of their PhD, they talked about the modes. And they actually showed how the mode of goodness works in our life. And believe it or not, when I teach leaders, there's secular research which has come to exactly the same conclusion. Exactly the same conclusion. And it talks about how for healthy balance, it has to be rhythmic. Okay? Rhythmic means activity, recharge. Activity, recharge. Activity, recharge. If your life is rhythmic in that way, that means you expend energy. So you're at work, you're doing your studies, whatever it is. If you expend energy, you give out energy, then you need to make sure that you also take whatever time and situation is required to recharge those batteries. We all know this intuitively. You have your mobile phone. You can use your mobile phone all day, but at the end of the day, you have to recharge that mobile phone. If you don't recharge it, what happens the next time you want to use your mobile phone? You can't use it anymore because you just took all the charge out and there was no recharge. So that's dynamic balance. Charge and recharge. Very, very simple. Very simple, but very, very powerful rule of life. And if we do that with the vehicle, as we said, the body and the mind, you will find that just like the mode of goodness, think about this carefully. We know the mode of passion is there, mode of goodness is there, mode of ignorance is there. We know the mode of goodness is actually the mode which allows us to do what? There's 3 things: destruction, creation, and maintenance. The mode of goodness allows us to do what? To maintain. Very, very simple, very clear principle. With the mode of goodness, if we live our lives in that healthy, balanced way, you're able to maintain your physical, mental, emotional well-being, which becomes a good vehicle for your spiritual practice. So these 6 needs are there. The first one is the need for security, so psychological and physical safety. What we often have in our communities is sometimes a lack of security. A person may be fearful, you know what, I'm hearing something in the class and it doesn't quite make sense. But if I raise my hand and ask, Prabhu, you said that, it seems like that doesn't make sense to me. Can you explain, or how do I understand that? Because it seems to contradict this other statement. If we lack security in our relationships, what happens is we suppress ourselves. If I feel it's not safe to express myself and be myself openly, not only do I not share what I really think and feel, but actually things which are issues can be repressed. And we know that when something that's an issue gets repressed, it comes up eventually in some other more intense way. So this first need is a need for security, to feel that I'm safe in the environments and in the relationships that I have. The second one is significance. People need to feel valued, actually. Need to feel that actually people, if I'm not there, people notice, people care about me, I'm important. What's happened, unfortunately, in the modern society is it's because it's so profit-centered. The whole world is designed in such a way that people have to literally worship money and spend all their time and energy and attention so much in that direction that often when people are being brought up, they're not given the same unconditional love and attention from the parents. And often it's not the parents are bad people. If the parents are stressed out, distracted, let's say they're going through some stresses themselves, it's hard for them to sometimes give that complete and heartfelt attention. When we get that kind of complete and heartfelt attention when we're very, very young, it leaves a deep impression in the consciousness. So if our caregivers give us their full and unconditional love, acceptance, and protection, it communicates a message that goes deep into our unconscious mind. And that message is that you are absolutely lovable, important, and valuable unconditionally. Not just when you achieve something, but at every single point in your life and in your journey. And that is a huge gift. Because if you have that, you go through life and you're very, very healthy in many ways. Because if you value yourself, you will transmit that sense of being important in a healthy way. You'll transmit that in every interaction. In other words, our relationship with ourselves is actually indicated by our relationship with other people. Do you understand what I'm trying to say like that? How we show up in our relationships with other people, they're clues about what I truly believe about myself. Not consciously, by the way. These are clues to what I truly believe about myself at a deep, unconscious level. It's very, very important. But it can also be changed by good association. This is why it's really important. This is stated by Parashara Muni. Parashara Muni is the father of Vyasadeva. In a literature called the Parashara, the Brihad Parashara Hora Shastra, he says that our behavior is based upon three things. One is our nature, the second is our upbringing, the third is our association. This is why in our tradition we put so much emphasis on association, because no matter how we've been socialized or brought up, if you have good loving association, part one, and if you're receptive to that, this is the other thing, by the way. This is equally important. It's not just having good association. If you're receptive to that good association, the way that they treat you will actually send a message deep into your heart about your own sense of self-worth. Think about that. If we put ourselves consciously in loving association, whatever our upbringing, you will start to believe through that association that you are valuable, that you can do it, you can achieve, etc., etc. So one of the most important things for any one of us as devotees to do for our total well-being is not just to allow things to just drift into our lives, but we encourage each and every one of you to actively seek out and be receptive to healthy, loving Vaishnava association. And take this as an experiment. You don't have to believe anything I'm telling you. But as an experiment, if you were to, for the next year, deliberately spend time in an open-hearted way, that means a vulnerable way, right? You're being honest about yourself, with devotees who are very loving and encouraging. If you examined how you were before that association and how you start to behave just 1 year from that association, you would see a significant change in your character. What we often have in our spiritual life is a form of Krishna consciousness where we sleepwalk. What that means is I just allow things to drift into my life because there's no intentionality. But if I'm intentional, if I'm purposeful, life can change in spiritual life very, very, very fast. So this idea of intentionally and with an open heart seeking out and being open with healthy association. Because when you trust someone, they have access to your heart, and therefore they can give you the greatest gift of acceptance, love, encouragement, and through that particular association, so many other things can be achieved. There's actually it works in both dimensions. I was looking at some research on this. There's some research that says that if you're around people who are stressed out, that stress hormone actually seeps out through the pores of the skin, and it has an effect on the people who are around them. So we don't know how powerful association actually is, and how much it actually changes us physically, mentally, and emotionally as well. And this is a study, by the way, and I can give you the references if you want later on. This study was even situations where the leadership is stressed out, but they don't tell anyone. So it's not like everyone knows that they're stressed, because it's happening on a very, very subtle level, on a much more psychological and emotional level as well. So security, significance of being appreciated, as we talked about. Satisfaction is important. Physical, emotional, social satisfaction, spiritual satisfaction. That we feel some satisfaction in our spiritual life. Because then it's easier to go on, because I'm getting, as Prabhupada puts it in another way, he just talks about taste. That's basically what this idea means, that you're getting some taste, right? I like the kirtan, right? I like the prasadam. I like the association of Vaishnavas. I like the service. There's some satisfaction there. Self-expression, we spoke about this to two groups yesterday when we were talking about talents. So when we were speaking on that workshop about engaging our talents in Krishna service, we were mentioning that Krishna says he's the ability in man. So just like we have the deity, which is a manifestation of Krishna, the holy name is a manifestation of Krishna, but the talents that each and every one of you have is also, or they are also manifestations of Krishna within you yourself. And when we don't bring those talents out, not only are we depriving ourselves, not only are we depriving our communities, not only are we depriving the world, but we're also depriving Krishna. We're saying, Krishna, I'm not going to give you back these wonderful talents that you've placed in me. And talents can be anything, by the way. You know, some of you, you're just very empathetic. That's a wonderful talent. Some of you, you're very good with attention to detail. Others, they're good at arranging and organizing things. So when I was giving this workshop yesterday, I was explaining our movement would probably be 100 times more successful with no additional effort. None. No additional effort from anyone. If we just took 5 minutes and everyone wrote down, what are my talents? How is Krishna manifesting within me in the form of my talents, skills, and abilities? And if we were then to think, right, based upon the fact that you've got all these amazing abilities and gifts, how do we best utilize these in order to give this wonderful gift of Krishna consciousness to the world? Think about that. There'll be an explosion. And the interesting thing is, often we have talents that we don't even know that we have. Isn't that amazing? So Krishna's in you in the form of various gifts, talents, and abilities. And this self-expression, one way of expressing ourselves is to express our talents with gratitude in the service of Krishna. The next one is spiritual direction. We all need spiritual growth and direction. This idea, tadvidi pratena priprasnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tatvadashanaha. We hear this again and again. In fact, that is one of the hallmarks of a healthy spiritual culture, is where we can inquire honestly and sincerely. Right? So what do you think would be the best use of my time? Right? I'm trying this, but it doesn't seem to be working. What do you think? Well, am I doing something wrong? Is there something that you would suggest that I do differently? Again, getting that perspective, that guidance from each other, from scripture, from teachers, etc. And the last one is socialization, having a sense of belonging, that I feel I belong in the family of Srila Prabhupada. One way of looking at this practically is that I have real friendships. People who know me and get me. There's a quote in Gita Nagari, one of the ISKCON properties. There's a quote in one of the buildings there that a friend, it's a very interesting quote, which I always resonate with, that a friend is someone who understands where I've come from, accepts me as I am, and still lovingly invites me to grow. I thought it was a very, very interesting way of looking at friendship. So they understand my journey. So I get why you're upset about this, because I know what you've experienced in your life. I know the backstory. So they understand the journey I've been on. They accept me as I am, right? Because we're all a work in progress. If we're going to wait till someone's perfect, then good luck on having friends in this world, right? So accepts me as I am. It's just a reality of it. But This third point is equally important because the tendency in the material world is to go to extremes. Either it's, this is how I am, Prabhu, you have to accept me, like, I'm just being real. It's like, well, thank you, but no thank you. Right? I'm not buying that. I don't order that on the menu anymore, right? So sometimes the idea is that I've got all these bad qualities, but I'm just being authentic. It's like, thank you, so that's okay. So that's one extreme. The other extreme is that we try to pretend to be something that we're not. They're actually both extremes. But the mode of goodness is actually a healthy synergy of both things. This is how I am. There's some good things. There's some things which are still a work in progress. That's okay. We're being authentic about the good and the not so good, but we're not just stopping there. It's not static. It's not that this is how I am and I just stop and I don't, you just have to tolerate the fact that I'm angry, rude, harsh, insensitive. No, I may have some degrees of this, but I want to have a relationship with you. Therefore, I don't want to impose my bad qualities on you. I'm trying to improve myself because I want us to have a real healthy relationship, and the other person is also doing the same. So we're trying to help each other. That's the dynamic way of working. Okay, so understands where I've come from, accepts me as I am, and yet still lovingly. This is an important word also. It's not just, you need to change. It's like lovingly invites me to grow. It's not a force. It's not an imposition. It's not a kind of culling down or chastisement, but I see that there's so much potential that you have to be even happier, to be even more joyful, to be even stronger, to be even to bring out even more of your great qualities in your spiritual journey. And that's why I'm suggesting that maybe you want to think about X, Y, and Z. There's a very, very different feel to it. Let's pause here because I know we're almost at time. I want us to quickly do one exercise and we'll open up for questions. So these 6 needs, I want you to do a self-evaluation. Okay, and please feel free to be as honest as possible when you do this evaluation. All I'm going to ask you to do is to think about where you are in terms of these 6 needs right now. Because what's really helped me in my life is when I use these scriptural understandings, or let's say different frameworks, whether they're scriptural or speak to the principle of Scripture, I always find that there's great value in doing some evaluation against these frameworks. Because when I do an evaluation, I can see, oh, I score highly in this area. That means I'm doing quite well in this area, but on this area, I scored very low. That means with my limited time and energy, what will help me to be more balanced and holistic and have more enthusiasm is if I focus in this area which is not doing so well. Do you see what I'm trying to say? So what I'm going to ask you to do is just take a moment with these 6. Just think to yourself, where am I against these 6 needs? Meaning, and you may want to do it like this, thinking of giving each one a score out of 10. So for example, the first one is security, psychological and physical safety. So to what extent do I feel that at this point in my spiritual life, I feel a sense of safety? For some of you, it may be 10, right? I don't feel, under kind of threat in any way, physically or emotionally. That could be a 10. For someone else, it may be because of certain things that happened, or maybe you're dealing with certain people who are quite harsh emotionally, and they sometimes, attack, snap at you or whatever. You may score it in a lower way. But go through each of these 6, and thinking about where you are in your life at this particular point in time, how would you score each of these 6 in terms of how much they're there in your life? Again, security is the first one, significance. To what extent do I feel appreciated and have a real sense of purpose in my life in my spiritual life at this time? Next one, satisfied. Again, being very honest. It can go up and down. How satisfied am I in my life in general? Or do I feel like a lot of I'm not happy. I feel that something missing. Whatever it is. So go through each of these 6, these 6, and just quickly write them down. I'll give you a few moments to do that. I want you to write them down. Where am I in my life against these 6 particular qualities? Abiram, so we can do Q&A until what time? Until the 9, that's fine. Okay. So, not in this session, because we're also conscious of time, but I'm going to ask you at some point today to just connect with one devotee, anyone. It could be someone that you have a relationship with already, or someone who you just feel, I'd like to just bounce it off you. Sometimes, to be honest, for devotees, they may find great value in speaking to someone who they don't know. right? Because it's like, it's completely confidential. You're not in my community. I'm not in your community. I like to talk about what I wrote down in these 6, like that. And just have a conversation off the back of your own evaluation. So where do I feel there needs to be a bit more attention in my life? And most importantly, what are some ideas? As you talk to someone else, what are some things I could do to address it? Right? What are some things I could do? For example, if I felt that I didn't score very highly in terms of satisfaction, what could I do to address that in my life? With a real focus on taking the reins of my spiritual life. What are some things I could do that would make me feel more satisfied in my Krishna consciousness? Okay? So you're scoring each of those 6. As a request, I invite you at some point today, just connect with someone. So just reach out to someone. Do you have 5 minutes? I'd love to talk to you about the exercise we did, and this is what I learned, and this is what I'm thinking to do. Do you have any ideas? This is what I'm thinking. Maybe you have some ideas on things I could do differently. So we're going to leave you with that. We're going to open up for Q&A in a moment. Before we do, I just want to read you some quotes from Bhaktivinoda Thakur, which really speaks to this idea. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur recognizes the importance of physical and mental needs, and he talks about them in a book called Chaitanya Shikshamrita, but he refers to them as rules. He says as follows: rules regarding the self are of 2 types, those for the body and those for the mind. Those rules to keep the body properly nourished so that one can remain healthy are bodily rules. Such things are regulated drinking, eating, sleeping, exercise, and for sickness, prescriptions of cure. Get this, if a person does not follow these rules, he cannot pass through life smoothly. He goes on to say, if a person does not follow these rules, so I'll read the next part of it. If you do not do this, your power of realization, concentration, imagination, contemplation, and judgment will be weak and will not properly function. Now just think about what happens in our communities. Sometimes poor decision making, especially if people are in positions of leadership, sometimes they have more responsibility, but they're not looking after themselves properly. Then everyone gets affected. So if you do not do this, your power of realization, concentration, imagination, contemplation, and judgment will be weak and will not properly function. Therefore, there'll be no advancement in the higher arts and sciences, and one will not be able to take the mind from material thoughts and direct it to thoughts of God. Very, very powerful statement by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So he's saying if we don't look after ourselves sufficiently well physically and emotionally, right, so physically and mentally, it can affect our ability to focus on Krishna. One more thing and then we'll open up for Q&A. By not taking care of these needs, the mind will be dominated by sinful thoughts and atheistic attitudes. Finally, men will become no better than a beast. Therefore, these bodily and mental rules are very necessary for success in human life. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Chapter 2, Part 1, Chaitanya Shikshamrita. And actually, if you read through that Chaitanya Shikshamrita, there's many things he says which will really surprise you about the importance of taking care of ourselves physically and mentally. Again, this idea of sadhana sharira, that the physical and mental bodies, they are vehicles for our spiritual practice. I saw in my life, when I had this period of exhaustion, my focus, it was much harder. It took so much more energy and effort to do everything because I was physically and mentally tired. Yeah. So we want to encourage you that we can always have a much brighter spiritual life if we do some introspection and if we also understand, yes, we're not the body, right? But we have a body, right? Just like you have a car. You're not the car, but you have a car, So you wouldn't say, well, I'm not the car, Prabhu. You want to pick up your spiritual master. Yeah, we're not the car, Prabhu. So it will happen anyway, right? Krishna will take care of it. There's no fuel in the car, right? The engine doesn't work, right? But it's okay, Prabhu. We're transcendental. It's not about the car, Prabhu, right? We're not the car. You'd think this person's crazy. Yeah? But we tend to do the same thing with our physical and mental vehicle. Okay, so we'll stop here. Let us see any comments or questions that you may have for the next few minutes, and then we'll go to breakfast.
Yes, so a big round of applause for Bhuta Bhavana, please. Thank you so much, Bhuta Bhavana. We have time for 1 or 2 questions. Anyone got any questions? Rasa Sindhu and Priyadarshini. Okay, done.
He's gonna ask you to make them like 1 sentence questions or something like that to spend time.
Thank you, Prabhu, for your class.
Thank you.
I appreciated the point you mentioned that that if a child is not given attention at an early stage, then the child doesn't consider itself to be themselves to be lovable or worthy, and that shows up. We're doing the workshop on inner critic, and that's that's a source of rich source for what inner critic comes up. My question to you is, in a society where we still value who's doing a big project, or how many books are we distributing, or that person is chanting 64 rounds, and there's all these numbers and accomplishments attached as a devotee. And I'm asking this for me, and for I'm sure a lot of people feel that way internally, that how do we create a culture of feeling lovable and a sense of belonging without any numbers attached? And it's the soul, it's the jiva that is appreciated, and not we are accomplishing through our means.
Yeah, it's a very, very good question. Let me just meditate a moment. I'm just going to think about this a little bit. Yeah, there's a term for this. There's a term called contingent self-esteem. When you have a society where people have contingent self-esteem, it means that they try to derive their value from what they've done externally. Now, this is the irony of it, and I've seen this. If, as a society, and it has to also be with individuals, communities, and so on, the irony is, for someone who develops inherent self-esteem, you actually are able to achieve more. I'll explain how this works. This is the irony of it. If my self-value is not dependent on the outcomes, then what it means is I can try all kinds of things, and if it doesn't work, I'm still valuable. But if my self-esteem is based upon the outcome, then I become a bit more insecure, because if it doesn't work, then it means that I'm less valuable. Right? In other words, if I don't have inherent self-esteem, or to the extent, because there's degrees of this, to the extent that I don't develop inherent self-esteem, then what happens is the outcome becomes my identity. That means the project failed, therefore I am a failure, you see? And what it then does is it causes people to shrink away from trying things. Because what they're actually fearful of is if it doesn't work out, it means that I've become inferior. It means I'm no longer valuable. So it actually takes us away as a community from trying. So there's from trying different things. So what I want to share with you, therefore, is there's actually a direct relationship between the achievements of the community and how they're valued. So even if someone is result-oriented, and there are some people who just by nature are very much outcome-oriented, even if someone is like that, it would actually make more sense to give people a deep sense of inherent self-value by appreciating, and this is also in the research. What they found in the research is there's two types of parenting. One type of parenting values people or values their children because their child achieved certain things. Does that sound familiar in anyone's household? Yeah, right. Ghanaian families are similar, right? Let's put it like that. So that's one type. But there's another type of parenting where the parents, when the child's young, the parents praise the child for the child's endeavor. And the reason for that, and the research shows that the children who were brought up more in that way, they actually have more determination, they try more things, they achieve more, and they're more successful because they know that my self-esteem is secure. Whether it works out or doesn't work out, I'm valuable. So therefore, let's just keep try different things, and you can try 100 different ways. And there's no disappointment if it doesn't work because it just didn't work. Okay, that didn't work. Let's just try something again that may work better. Now again, going back to Parashara Muni's comment, we can get that through association, but we have to be trying to bring that into our association for ourselves and for other people. It can be done, by the way. There's a lot of things that you can do. What's meant to happen, for example, with Shastra, when we read, if you read scripture and hear classes attentively, the research, I actually looked into this research-wise. Every time you do something attentively, you increase the degree of neuroplasticity of the brain. That means basically your mind becomes much more impressionable, to the point that when you're reading these statements, it can override the negative impressions that we received in our childhood. I did a study of this, how to change samskars, basically. So there's many different things. If you're attentive in your chanting, if you're attentive in good association, you increase in neuroplasticity. So therefore, the positive statements that you read they will actually enter very, very deeply into you, and that will change the way you see yourself, the way you see other people, and the way that you show up in the world. Now, it's not an overnight thing, by the way. So it's not like I read, BBD said that, I read 2 pages of Bhagavad Gita, it didn't work, he's lying. It's not like that. The other thing that changes your samskars is whatever you do repeatedly. That's also why there's such an emphasis on regular practice. Because if you, it's just like, you'll all know the analogy of how a drop of water can wear down rock. So something that's hard, it can be worn down by something that's soft if it's repeatedly done. You can also do this through other ways. That's a whole seminar in itself. Prayer can do that. When you actually pray regularly, you can change your samskars in that way. But basically, also if you're in a more relaxed state, without going into all the science behind it, your brain waves actually change. When you're in a stressed out state, your brain wave is in what's called high beta. So you're on alert, you're more anxious. If you're relaxed, your brain waves go into an alpha state. They've done studies of the child in the womb. When children are in their mother's womb, their brain waves, they've measured the brain waves. And it's the brain waves being in a hyper-relaxed state, which correlates to them being most impressionable. So what happens on the micro level is when you trust someone, then your guard goes down, you're relaxed. That's why the association is so important. Your guard goes down, you're relaxed. And then if that's a loving association, what they say to you, it is actually changing your samskars. Even things from your childhood, they can be overridden. You see this, you all have seen this. You've seen certain devotees who came to Krishna consciousness and they got good association, and you've seen that person's more confident now. That person's more willing to do service. That person's more enthusiastic. But they weren't like that when they joined, right? They weren't like that when they joined. They got good association and they were receptive to it. That association is present in the books, it's present in the classes, it's present through prayer, it's present through even your own contemplation. Right now, and this happens every class, by the way, right now, whatever I'm saying to you is also being met by an internal dialogue. For some of you, you may hear it and think, when's BPD going to stop talking? I'm hungry, man. Like breakfast time. Like, dude, what's wrong with you, right? For other people, you're listening to it and you're thinking, oh, that makes sense. Yeah, I can see where that came from. Or for someone else, it's like, I understand why I think the way I do. Because I remember when my parents were young, they were struggling, right? So they didn't really give much attention to me. So I can see that I've got this pattern in my adult life where I'm trying to get attention. You'll be able to figure these things out. And even just being conscious of these things can change the samskars as well. Anyway, I don't want to take too much time, but these are some things we can do. But it has to start with us. Even if you just notice this and you practice acting in a different way, you'll change your samskars. One technique, just one technique to your question, I'll take the last question, then we'll stop. One technique, if you just think to yourself, how would I treat someone that I love and care for? And if you, in your day-to-day spiritual life, treat yourself in that same way, you'll see your samskars will change. The way you behave to yourself is actually sending a signal to your subconscious mind about your own value. That's how it works. The way you actually deal with yourself sends a signal to your subconscious mind. So through your intelligence, you actually create samskars as well. If you treat yourself properly, you did something, it didn't work out. Okay, it's all right. It didn't work out, but I can learn from it. I'm not a bad person. We can try again. If you even do that, you'll see your samskars will change. I kind of studied this because there's a whole science to it, which is in different places in Prabhupada's books, classes, etc. Does that answer your question? And feel free to, anyone who wants to go into that in more detail, just grab me at any point. We can get into more detail. I'll have last question and we'll have breakfast. Yes?
Prabhu, you said it's very important to have healthy association.
It's a must.
And more so to learn to ask the right questions.
Yes.
What are the right questions?
Yeah. It depends on what you're going through at any one point in time. But the principle is what's on your mind and what do you need that's going to help you to grow. Right? So what's on your mind? See, for example, there's research that says that when you write about difficult or challenging experiences, it changes you physically and mentally. There's research on this. They've done studies where they had a group. They took blood test samples beforehand. Then they told the group, for the next few days, I just want you to write down for 15 minutes about a difficult experience that you've been through in your life. That's all. You don't have to show anyone the paper, nothing like that. Just write down about it. If you want the quote, the research there's loads of research online. The professor's name is Professor James Pennebaker, Pennebaker. He's one of the world's experts on journaling. What they did, After people had just done that for a few days, 15 minutes a day for a few days, after a few days, they took their blood test samples. They found that their immune system was stronger. Because actually the immune system and the emotions, they perform the same function. The purpose of the emotions and the immune system is to keep out that which is unhealthy and to allow in that which is healthy. So your expression is linked to your emotional, physical, and mental well-being. Like that, you know? So by doing that kind of stuff, asking people, well, you know, you've known me for some time, what do you think I should be working on, right? Or this is where I'm struggling. So just revealing the mind like that, you'll change your actual system. You'll change yourself physically, mentally, and emotionally, especially if you do it regularly. With devotees, this is really important though, with devotees who actually are trustworthy. It's a form of impersonalism to expect that every devotee is gonna act properly at all times. It's just not true. And that's not to put anyone down. Right? Because we all go through that. We may have days where we're in good consciousness, days where we're not in such good consciousness. So if you're going to be open-hearted, which you should be, to transform, you have to also be doing it in the right association. Yeah. So by using your head, you can open your heart and keep it open. Does that answer your question? Okay. Thank you for your question. So my apologies, we didn't have more time for Q&A. That was my fault, actually. It's nothing to do with the organizers. But as I said, it's something that we can get into and discuss more at any point. But I want to plant that seed with you. And I'm telling you from my own experience, there's so much scope for us to become stronger and more enthusiastic in our spiritual lives if we take on board some of these ideas. So it's not just the knowledge or the philosophy, but it's how it's applied in a wise, compassionate, and personal way in our own spiritual life to move forward. Yeah? Okay. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.